This earthly existence of ours is more brittle than the glass bangles that ladies wear. Gandhi, February 2nd, 1934.
It's the same point that sages and spiritual teachers are always trying to alert us to not to depend for our permanent security and happiness on what he calls this earthly existence. And it's a reminder and an inspirational pointer that we have another existence beyond this earthly one.
Yeah, and this time in Gandhi's life here, it comes directly on the heels of a huge earthquake that happened in India at that time, killing tens of thousands of people, which of course would make you reflect on the nature of human life as beautiful and shiny and to be enjoyed, and yet incredibly delicate. And it makes me think of the three qualities of life from the Buddhist perspective. And the first one is impermanence. Nothing lasts. Nothing. Nothing is going to stick around forever, not even mountains, and certainly not you. And then another quality is no self, in the sense that there is no true you involved with any of these things. All of your ideas of how you are in the world and the selfness of other things in the world, they're all also just illusions. This is anicca and anatta, and then there's also dukkha, which is suffering. That because there's no true identity that we attribute to things, and none of these things are permanent anyway, when we attach to them, when we need them to have those qualities and they turn out to be not true, then we suffer. And so much pain in the world, so much of this suffering is simply a result of not understanding that these are the qualities of human life. As painful and as difficult to look at as they are, it's always there. Nothing lasts forever. And if we can accept that one simple aspect of our world, gosh, what a difference and change it makes. But not to think of it as a bad thing, but rather think of our lives as these incredibly shiny jewels, delicate, but worthy of enjoying while they last.
I believe in the sovereign rule of love, which makes no distinctions.
Recently, we read a very similar observation by Martin Luther King Jr., and I think we need to understand that making no distinctions does not mean that we don't see the individual needs of each person. What it does mean is that beneath all individual differences, there is the same living spirit, and that is primarily an expression of love, and we should respond to it as such. And knowing that is what makes a nonviolent actor so very effective in human interactions.
Just earlier today, I was on a virtual call, a panel with Michael Nagler in Spain, talking about peace and nonviolence. And one of the questions that came in for Michael from the gathering that was there, this large group of people, was that in Spain, there was some big movement toward more use of drones and robots and machines in law enforcement, and that these creations were given the rights to choose whether or not people would live or die, and how do we then apply the law of nonviolence to these things that you cannot reason with, you cannot have a nonviolent convergence with, you cannot connect with and humanize. And it separates everybody. It makes it that much more difficult to connect. And Michael smiled and said, well, Of course, this is very difficult and painful, but we have to recognize that everything that we do when we're enacting this deep love and compassion in the world is healing the world at a deep level, and it impacts all of us. It impacts the whole world. It certainly has an effect upon us specifically, but upon our community and the space around us. So whether or not we're able to reason with the machine or to help it experience compassion while perhaps it's enacting violence, it can't second guess, but all of those machines are programmed by people, guided by people. There's another person on the other end of that thing somewhere. And simply by taking part in this movement of love, this sovereign rule of love, it has such power that it influences all of us, even at a distance, even through this intermediate of a scary metal machine. And hopefully we don't have too much more of that as the future moves on. But we can trust that this wonderful law of love will continue to heal the world either way.
You must never despair of human nature. Gandhi, November 5th, 1938.
I realize I say this every now and then, but this is just critically important to the core of Gandhi's belief system and his effectiveness. And that is that underneath all kinds of negative, violent, humiliating, dehumanizing behavior, human nature is always there to be reawakened, re-engaged. And if you are able to do that in yourself, first of all, have that faith that that nature is perhaps dormant, but always present in yourself. If you can awaken it in yourself, that leads to the awakening of it in others.
And developing that deep faith in yourself, that recognition that you inside have the possibility for pure compassion, pure unconditional love and friendliness, the ability to connect and to relate, the ability to understand the cause and the effect within violence and to make that difference, but recognizing that you didn't always understand that, at least at the intellectual level. And instead, it took some time to connect that deeper impulse of healing and compassion that is part of every human to your consciousness, to then recognize that you can overcome your own cultural bias or whatever it was that you were taught when you were young to do something new. That's why we're all here right now thinking about this process. We're all here studying Gandhi together. And recognizing that because it's in you, that means it's also in other people. And all we need to do is to continue to awaken that true, deepest impulse. It's always there. We can rely on it. And we shouldn't despair, because human nature, at its deepest level, is fundamentally kind and good.
Satyagraha is a process of educating public opinion, such that it covers all the elements of society and, in the end, makes itself irresistible. Violence interrupts the process and prolongs the real revolution of the whole social structure. Gandhi, March 31st, 1946.
As Gandhi said elsewhere, nonviolence is our destiny and our nature and the guiding principle of our human evolution. And what wars are and conflicts, which we take to be reality showing up, are actually interruptions, that's a direct quote, interruptions in the even progress of nature.
And so often when we're talking about violence, it's portrayed as a shortcut, something that speeds up whatever process we're doing. And that peace and nonviolent activities are somehow the slower, less effective method. But again and again, I'll say that studies show that it is the exact opposite. Erica Chenoweth's research has shown that peaceful and nonviolent methods of resistance and change, even at the level of governments, work twice as fast and twice as effectively. It is incredibly exciting to recognize we're not taking the long path. It's the more effective path. And if we engage in violence, it, like Gandhi says, interrupts the actual flow of what we're doing. That's the thing that slows it down. That's the pothole that ruins this smooth healing journey that we're on. And so make sure that you invest your time in the most effective, efficient method. That is loving your neighbor. That is reaching out and healing the world a bit at a time. That is the quick route toward a better world.
When a child, my nurse taught me to repeat Ramanama whenever I felt afraid or miserable, and it has been second nature with me with growing knowledge and advancing years. Gandhi, August 17th, 1934.
Ramanama means the repetition of a mantram or name of God, a holy word. And so many things are illustrated by this memory of his, which he often goes back to. That is that it is often women in the civilization who maintain spiritual continuity, and that the repetition of the name, of course in his case was Rama, in ours might be Jesus, Krishna, Allah, whatever, is a way of stabilizing the mind. It's something that children can learn to do. If only we knew this, that we can give our kids the mantra, it would save them so much grief, so much fear. I look back on my own childhood, but at least I learned it eventually.
It's funny how long it can take us to come across these healing medicines that we need. And some people are lucky enough to be given them when they're young. People are taught how to manage their mind, to balance their emotions. Some kids are taught how to move in ways that keep them from hurting themselves later. Proper posture and how to relax, how to work within communities and to have conversations without aggression and to de-escalate tension. And like, what amazing skills to learn as a kid. There's no reason children can't learn them. We simply focus on other things in most cultures and schools, and certainly my culture in school. And how exciting it is to know that in some places, like with Gandhi, that he was given this tool, this medicine at a young age, and it kept him centered. And I'm sure it played some large role in allowing him to be healthy enough by the time he was an adult to become the man that he did. And may we all, over time, have access to these healing methods of every shape and form, that we step away from teaching methods that harm us and instead spend the time to cultivate and share methods that make the world a better place. What a much better use of time.
In this, there is no room for machines that would displace human labor and that would concentrate power in the hands of a few. Gandhi, July 28, 1946.
This is the mature Gandhi unfolding two of the important principles in his economics. Gandhian Economics is a book on this by Diwan and Lutz and many others. It's such a useful contribution to modern civilization. They're just being picked up in pieces here and there. And here he is showing that he was not what we call a Luddite. He was not against machinery, but he did not want machinery to replace humanity. And that's where we lose our discrimination and we let the technology and the machinery take over and dictate what we should be building and how. And wherever in the world, like for example, in Swedish auto factories, I understand, human beings are allowed to be at the center. You can have mass production without dehumanization. But ultimately, what he wanted was production by the masses, not mass production. The late E.F. Schumacher was a wonderful exponent of Gandhi's economics. He has a book called Buddhist Economics, which deals also very well with the basic Gandhian principles. Gandhian economics is so simple. I mean, 2 or 3 basic considerations like trusteeship and localism enable you to build a whole, far more just and far more equitable system.
I have not yet learned anything about Gandhian economics. Sounds really fascinating. And it is useful to remember that economics is simply a representation. It's a symbol of power shifting around in the hands of people, recognition of effort and work and support systems, and represents food for people. It represents housing. And so having an equitable method of arranging your economic system is really important. And of course, I grew up in a system that is tremendously inequitable, where power is concentrated in vast numbers in just a few hands. And the vast majority of humans themselves have very little to share, no matter how much work that they do, no matter how much self-betterment they have in their life. And so to recognize that in order to have a just and equitable world, that means we need an economic system as part of our social system that allows for healing and nurturing, sharing, and the uplifting of anybody who is poor. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, that poverty is the worst form of violence that the government enacts toward its people.
Mutual tolerance is a necessity for all time and for all races. Gandhi from the mind of Mahatma Gandhi.
This should be self-evident, however difficult it is to achieve in practice. Many of us can increase our empathy with and acceptance of some people, but as Gandhi is insisting, it has to be all people everywhere, or we never really will see a regime of peace.
This development of empathy and mutual tolerance is something that seems to be such a difficult thing for a lot of humans. I wonder how much of it is institutional, because certainly a lot of things like racism is an idea that was invented. Of course, being wary of outsiders and tribal mentality is perhaps built into humanity. But perhaps if we were able to extend our sense of our tribe beyond just the, whatever it is, 140 people that we seem to feel comfortable being around, but rather we can allow that bubble of togetherness to expand to encompass the billions and billions, maybe the trillions if we include all sentient beings on the planet. And maybe we can begin to see each other as family, support each other, help each other, reach out. I do have a dream that this kind of world is possible.
My goal is friendship with the world, and I can combine the greatest love with the greatest opposition to wrong. Gandhi from the mind of Mahatma Gandhi.
The way he puts that principle, that discrimination, is straightforward. It's quite simple. And yet many of us don't get it. We think that friendship with an opponent means letting him or her run roughshod over us and be unjust and exploitive. And the critical thing to realize is that it is precisely in resisting their exploitation that we really step into our human relationship and our human responsibility with them. If we just grasp this one principle, I think we see into the heart of nonviolent struggle and can apply it effectively everywhere.
So beautiful. And to recognize that when somebody is doing something wrong, if they're being violent perhaps, that they're actually committing a violence against themselves. People that are committing violence, maybe they're doing some terrible crime, and you can look at them, and rather than hating them, you can see that they are being as damaged as the person that is being done violence to, that the whole process is damaging everybody involved, and you can have compassion on them, because we've all been stuck in this loop of violence for as long as most humans can remember. And by recognizing that humanity in the person that is behaving incorrectly, and to stop them from committing violence, not just because we want to stop violence, but for their own sake. In the same way that India wanted the United Kingdom, they wanted the power brokers in London to release them, because they themselves were doing harm to England.
Service, and not bread, becomes with us the staff of life. We eat and drink, sleep and wake for service alone. Such an attitude of mind brings us real happiness. Gandhi from Iravda Mandir.
This foundational insight would completely restructure the concept of human occupation. The idea of making something for somebody else and getting paid for it is very thin. It doesn't really grasp the imagination of the human being. It turns out that every single one of us, without exception, has a need, and not just a drive or a desire, a need to serve. So to find out what our capacities are, how to engage them in the service of the world, that is what Gandhi would call our svadharma, or our individual obligation, or obligatory path, and also liberatory path.
This is one insight that it feels very near and dear to my own heart, because now for several decades I've lived completely upon donation work and working for free and being supported by the community and devoting myself to service alone. And honestly, it has left me economically pretty poor. And yet, in so many ways, I feel incredibly wealthy. And I can attest to the dedication of life to service being far more nourishing and far more worthwhile, far more profitable, I can say, than devoting my life toward trying to get what I can from the world around me. It is far more nourishing and far more worthwhile to spend your life giving.
Nature is relentless and will have full revenge for any such violation of her laws. Gandhi, Young India, March 12, 1925.
Yeah, as we like to say these days, nature votes last, and it's become more particularly important now with the awareness of the detriment to nature that's caused by our industrial civilization. So it's quite remarkable that Gandhi saw that so early on, long before there was a concept of nature degradation. He was able to see it happening. He was foresighted in that regard. Mind you, by nature, he means much more than just external nature. It was all of a piece in his worldview.
Taoism, there's this famous statement, Dao Fa Zi Ren. And this is to say that the nature of the Tao is natural. It's automatic. It's self-so. That's how the Tao works. And when we go against the Tao, that's when things begin to fall apart. That's when suffering happens. That's when illness happens, and certain damage to the world around us. And by learning instead to move with the Tao, with the flow of nature in every level, things prosper, things heal and grow. And so one perspective on this movement of peace and nonviolence is that we are simply taking activities that are moving with the flow of the Tao. And as Michael says, nature gets the last vote. And so we strive for whatever we want. We have opinions and ideas. We want things to be our way. But if it's not moving with the flow of nature, when nature takes its final tally and puts in the last vote, it decides how things are going for us. We want to move with nature, not against it.
No awakening is possible without the people at large realizing their power. Gandhi, Speeches and Writings of Mahatma Gandhi, Volume 4.
The way all systems of oppression operate, and that even implies to democratic systems, which are flawed and which people are not given the information they need to make a reasonable vote, all of those things. And one of the main operations of exploitive systems is to deprive the exploited of their sense of power, of their ability to choose. Once they recover that, the revolution is at hand. As we often see it today, it's when people shed their fear, then the regime has no hold over them.
In the clinic, similarly, I've noticed that one of the great benefits of working with traditional Chinese medicine is that it makes use of this wonderful poetic language to make the problems that people are experiencing seem easier to grasp, easier to relate to their normal life. When there are vague discussions of genetics or mitochondria or neurochemicals, people feel very disconnected from their own experience. But if I can put it in language in terms of heat and cold and qi flow, people start to think, oh, okay, I understand how this works a little better. I have a sense of what I can do to change myself, to heal. And it's fascinating to watch that when people have that sense of agency again, when they recognize that they have power, they have capacity, they have something to say about their own health, and they are not feeling disempowered any longer by the system of words or the way that they've interpreted health information in the past. When they feel empowered, suddenly they feel excited to take care of themselves. They're willing to go out and begin to exercise or eat well, because suddenly they come to understand a little more about how things are working, and they feel less like a stranger in their own process. And so I can imagine that in the social scale, it's the same. That once people have a sense that they actually have agency, they have the opportunity, the power to make changes, I bet people feel more and more empowered and more excited to get out and help the world heal.
The pursuit of truth is true bhakti. Gandhi from Yuravda Mandir.
Bhakti means love of God, and God is truth. And so to become aware of the truth and spontaneously live in accordance with it is love of God, purely and simply.
And And it's interesting to see that our world has not quite embraced yet the possibility of truth, and truth as a kind of devotion, that one of our values can be the pursuit of truth. It is a really important value to me personally because I was raised in a world where I was lied to constantly, shall we say. And when I began to uncover those lies later in life, it was very destabilizing, demoralizing for me. And I've spent then decades healing those rifts between myself and what feels like the real world, slowly recognizing how things are, what isn't true, and restoring my trust in the possibility of knowing what's true in the world, the best that we can as humans. And that makes truth one of the core values in my life, pursuing truth, willing to look to see what's really true, what's really happening. And that's what's led me here toward Michael's work, toward Gandhi's work, nonviolence, because I can look to see what's true. Here's what I've been told my whole life about the nature of the world, how people are, the kind of force we need to control the population. And what do I find from my own experience? What do I see when I look at the data? And this pursuit of truth has led me here. And I'm so grateful that you've joined us. Please do share down below in the comments section what you've been learning and the value that truth has in your own life, and whether or not it is bhakti for you, a communion with God, communion with something bigger than yourself.
The cause is great, the remedy is equally great. Let us prove worthy of them both. Gandhi, from a speech made at Madras, March 18, 1919.
It has often occurred to me recently that because the problems that we are facing are towering, it requires a towering progress in human awareness, in nonviolence, to overcome them. And I think the whole difficulty is we don't want to get beyond our comfort zone. We don't want to try anything unusual. And we think that we can just nickel and dime the problem out of existence. But we're being challenged to rise up greater than we have been. And I don't think that's such a bad thing.
And so often in the movies and in the books that I like to read, I read about a book a day, and a lot of them are fun fantasy, sci-fi style novels. And one of the interesting themes that often seems to show up is that humanity is never able to organize and come together until some great force forces them, makes us as humans join together as one human family in order to overcome this great threat, whether it's an alien invasion or some other great threat, depending on the book or the movie. And I'm always hopeful that even though it's a silly idea, maybe that is one of the ways that humanity will finally realize that we're all in this together, that we cannot escape any of our problems by ourselves. We must join together as one single family. And because our extinction is coming otherwise, the cause is great. And this remedy of love and compassion and coming together in harmony is even more great. And I feel as humans, as great souled creatures, that we are worthy of them both. We can do this. One person at a time, we join together, we link hands. You listening to this are now part of this chain, and I am so grateful that you're here.
The humility of a satyagrahi knows no bounds. He does not let slip a single opportunity for settlement, and he doesn't mind if anyone therefore looks upon him as timid. Gandhi, Satyagraha in South Africa.
The ideal satyagrahi that Gandhi has in mind here is a person of tremendous self-confidence. And that's not boastfulness, it's not pride, it's recognition, on the one hand, of one's smallness vis-a-vis the entire process of nature, the entire human community, but on the other hand, a recognition of one's importance and one's power. So that's where the humility comes in, and I think it mostly shows up in the following way, that even when we're in a campaign that succeeds, we recognize that some process is the force that has driven the success, and we only succeeded in the sense, and insofar as we stepped out of its way.
To have the willingness to recognize that we are infinitely small as individuals, and to set aside even our own sense of self in the desire for wholeness and a holistic recognition of the world, to connect, to love, to feel in relation with everything, is the greatest negation of your small self that you can imagine. And at the same time, to recognize that we have part of our nature, this incredibly powerful, this vast force of love and relationship and connection as one whole gathering of sentient beings, as one whole community. And because of that, we shouldn't mind if somebody thinks poorly of us or has their opinions or thinks that we're wrong. Certainly we can take their opinions into account because we want to learn from everybody that we meet. And at the same time, to recognize that where we are coming from as individuals, as activists, as change makers, is greater than our small selves. And so it doesn't matter if our small selves are funny or not educated enough, not smart enough, not good looking enough. Those kinds of things don't matter because we're part of something much greater. And if you can relate yourself to that greater whole, then the concerns of little people and little minds will stop bothering you, including your own.
All religions teach that two opposing forces act upon us, and the human endeavor consists in a series of eternal rejections and acceptances. That's from Mahatma, Volume 2.
Yes, every religion has seen that on one level, reality, and human reality included, is a duality. In the ancient Hebrew scriptures, this was referred to as Yetzir Hara and Yetzir Hatov, the impulse for good and the impulse for evil. And that's where human choice comes in. We can recognize the force of good and choose it. Now, naturally, life also has complications and vastly subtler forces, but it is helpful to recognize that on one level, things are really simple, not to say stark. There is good and there's evil, and we need to recognize and choose the former and reject the latter.
It's interesting, the Taoist perspective, of course, is different than this. Not to disagree with any of it, but if we see the world more in the sense of yin and yang, and there are expansive, life-giving properties, and there are aspects that take away life and contract. And we want to lean into the qualities that are nourishing life. As humans, that's pretty beneficial to us. And to recognize that there are people that simply don't understand that quality, that people are acting non-skillfully. People are genuinely trying to do the right thing for themselves. They're trying to make their lives better, trying to be healthier themselves, trying to take care of their family. And they're simply doing it non-skillfully. They're doing it because they think it will help them to rob or steal or control or injure this other person. And if we can simply recognize them as damaged, people that have had violence done to them, they've been lied to about something, then we can see them as part of the illness. They are part of the victims that we're trying to help and to heal. And so I reject a lot the concept of evil simply because it's an idea that people are bad. And I do not think that any people are bad. I think that people are inherently wanting to heal and wanting to be part and connected. It's simply that violence has damaged our world. Some people are more deeply damaged than others, but everybody deserves healing and acceptance. At least that's the way that I see it at this time in my life.
The world rests upon a bedrock of satya, or truth. Asatya, or untruth, also means non-existent, and satya, or truth, also means that which is. If untruth does not so much as exist, its victory is out of the question. And truth, being that which is, can never be destroyed. This is the doctrine of satyagraha in a nutshell. Gandhi from Satyagraha in South Africa.
Yes, this conclusion of Chapter 10 of Satyagraha in South Africa is classic, it's inspiring, it's fundamental. Sat, which means true, also means that which is, as Gandhi points out, and it also means the good. Good person is Sat, and Satya means goodness, and of course Satyagraha is grasping onto that goodness.
I also find this really inspiring that because the nature of life is, for humanity at least, is to heal and to grow and to connect and to love. And it is only ignorance and illness and self-defeating principles that cause us to live in violent and other unhelpful ways. And by its nature, those methods never last. They peter out, they destroy themselves, as we see over and over again. And so it can be very heartening to recognize that all we're doing is leaning into the truths of the universe, the truth of our own deep human nature, that part of what we're doing is healing, and that healing movement is the only natural movement in human life. And simply as we pay better attention, we learn how to achieve the goals that we actually want, that it is natural that we will eventually overcome and heal and connect the world, and peace will be restored. This is my fervent hope and dream.
With Satya and Ahimsa, you can bring the whole world to your feet. Gandhi, Young India, March 10th, 1920.
Isn't that a wonderful truth? With Satya, or clinging to what truly is, and Ahimsa, or lack of any desire to harm, you have your grasp on the fundamental principles underlying life and the evolutionary drive in nature. And of course, being able to align yourself with that power keeps you humble on the one hand, but enables you to deploy immense power on the other without being attached to it as a personal endowment.
And this is a further expansion of the last one. This recognition that because we're talking about working with the flow of the Tao, we're talking about engaging with the world as it actually is. We're talking about engaging with human nature in a more realistic way. This isn't just for dreamers, as I was mentioning. It's not just for idealists, but rather we're seeing more clearly what humans actually want and how we actually work, and the nature of love in the world. Maybe we could say the power of spirit. Some here would say the power of God or gods. And we recognize that with this truth, that everything that we're looking for is available to us. This is the answer. This is the cure that we're looking for. We simply need to let enough people know that it's available.
How can I reach 700,000 villages? This is the argument pride whispers to us. Start with the faith that if you fix yourself up in one single village and succeed, the rest will follow. Gandhi, from Young India, June 17, 1926.
This is a dilemma that is facing all of us who are influencers, who are trying to bring about social change. That how do we reach into not 700,000 villages, but about 230 million people glued to their individual social media and so forth? Gandhi's answer, which has always given me a certain amount of comfort, a lot of comfort actually, he once put it this way: if you throw the right pebble into the right pond, the ripples will take care of themselves. So, of course, that doesn't mean that we can take our hands off once we've made a message of some kind. We try to get it out there. But there is some confidence which he imparts to us that if the message is truthful and necessary, it will have a momentum behind it which will allow it to spread.
Yeah, in the world at the moment that I'm recording this, there's over 8 billion people in the world. So how do we reach these 8 billion people to let them know that there's something better? And I think Gandhi's right that perhaps it is just pride, some form of pride in us that says that we have to do this alone. That as change makers and activists in the world, that what can I do? I'm just one person. But what can I do? I'm just one person, said 8 billion people. And so by making that change, and once again, by being that change, by showing the person next to you, showing your one village that it's possible to live and to be different, to succeed as that kind of human, this is the example then that will spread. Somebody else will follow it, and then somebody else will follow that. And this is the only way that we can learn, by lighting one candle at a time. And then pretty soon, the entire world is lit up in a beautiful glow of satyagraha, of love and companionship, and a better future for all of us.
Still, the community stood unmoved. Only the weaklings slipped away. But even the weaklings had done their best. Let us not despise them. Gandhi, Satyagraha in South Africa.
This compassion for the weak is just pure Gandhi. It's just where he stands out as different from any of us. When we're in an intense movement, naturally we tend to feel a lot of disrespect for people who don't have the courage to step up. Now, he was against cowardice with all his being, all the time throughout his whole career, but it never meant that he would fail in respect for a human being, whatever their position, whatever their motivation.
And I appreciate this so much from Gandhi, as having lived my life as a weaker person, as a person very afraid, because of illness, because of what I'd been taught, because I'd been injured, because of my natural tendencies, whatever it was. It wasn't something that I chose. I always wanted to be somebody who was brave, who could stand up for the courage of my convictions. But it was very difficult for me, because I was afraid, because I was exhausted, because I'd been told that I couldn't. This wasn't my fault. I didn't ask for these things, speaking personally. And I would hate to have been despised by somebody who thought I should have been different. But instead, luckily for me, I had people come to me and lift me up, teach me something different, give me the methods to heal, to become stronger, to not be exhausted anymore, to stop being sick, to give me better ways. And then I stopped being afraid. And if we can lift everybody up this way, if we can stop seeing people who are weak as bad, and rather see them as people who are victims of the system, maybe people who are born weak, it's not their fault. Everybody's doing their best. We uplift everybody, including the people who didn't seem to be helping us on the way, because our job as the more able-bodied, able-minded people now, our job is to help lift up the people who can't lift themselves. And then maybe when they heal, they become the people who lift us and others up. And that's always the way. And together, we move forward. We don't leave anybody behind.
Even in a most perfect world, we shall fail to avoid inequalities, but we can and must avoid strife and bitterness. Gandhi, Young India, October 7th, 1926.
Gandhi's position was realistic and unusual in that he did not attempt economic leveling of all parties. And he was able to refrain from this because he didn't regard economic capacity as the full measure of a human being or the full meaning of human life. So what he argued for was heart unity, that we should spontaneously adopt the welfare of others as our own. And once we had done that, we could also open our minds to different measures of welfare, so that in the end, there was enough to go around. There was enough for everyone's need, if not enough for everyone's greed.
This is another Michaelism, Naglerism that has always impacted me, that in our world right now, we have enough for everyone's need. We do not have enough for everyone's greed. And we look around and we see incredible amounts of greed. We even see cultures, my culture in particular, that looks up to greed as an aspiration. And so to recognize that even if we were to bring everyone together and to give everybody what they need, again, which we could do, the natural tendency of some people to be afraid and to grasp for more than they actually need, because maybe they need more than they have, or somebody else will have more, or maybe they're not good enough, whatever inadequacy or insecurity shows up and causes them to act out. We have to recognize that even as we begin to change the world, in this case, Gandhi's talking about the most perfect world, even in that world, there will still be that human tendency to be afraid or to be causing other people grief because of our own lack and our own deficiencies. And so we always have to be aware of that possibility and to continuously educate people to get better, to heal, to move toward the light, like any good green growing thing does. And if we can take those measures and make them part of our society so that we all continuously help each other, that if we build that in to our social blueprint, then even once we finally manage to get it all together, to stop war, to stop violence, then we'll have all of these measures, these protections ahead of time in place, knowing what human tendency is, to preempt that and help the people heal before it turns into a real problem. What a wonderful idea.
I wholeheartedly detest this mad desire to destroy distance and time. Gandhi, from the mind of Mahatma Gandhi.
And mind you, this was spoken before jet travel and rockets to the moon and all the rest of it. It's really, I think, a part of Gandhi's very deep commitment to and feeling for Swadeshi, that we are in a particular setting for a good reason. That's where we are to work out our karma. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't move to a different area, but it does mean that where moving around starts to occupy more of our attention and distract it from the actual circumstances by which we're surrounded, it becomes a huge distraction. And today we often see people running around from place to place rather than solving the problems in any given place. So once again, this was right on and difficult to accept, but we have to take it seriously.
And it's certainly a discussion in environmental circles, for instance, that part of our need to constantly move faster and go further has been destroying the environment around us. The airplanes, the cars, the ships that we travel on, everything that we do to shorten distances and to give us more room to travel around. And a number of very serious environmentalists have been questioning this mental habit that we have, this tendency to constantly create opportunities for that kind of travel. And recognizing that perhaps there's something pathological in that mindset that we need to look at as a people. And not all people, of course, have that mindset, but enough of us do, obviously. And I think it's fascinating to think that perhaps if we weren't traveling around, maybe we'd be more invested in local culture. Maybe we would be more willing to support each other as a community because the people that we're around are the people that we need to heal with. And I remember Michael once offering the example that if we were locked in a traveling carriage together, if we were maybe on a spaceship and we were traveling some huge distance together, and the people that we were in that spaceship with, that let's say 150 people, we're in that spaceship with for the rest of our lives, we couldn't go anywhere. How important would it become to nurture every relationship, to make sure everybody stayed centered and calm, healthy and well? One person becoming sick or becoming violent and agitated would become an issue for everybody, because that's it. That's your whole community. And we would become committed toward the welfare of everyone involved because we rely upon everybody there. And that mindset is very different than, I don't like this town, I'm heading to another one, which, granted, is one that I've taken as well and benefited from. And so I find this a really fascinating idea that Gandhi's offering. I'll have to consider it a lot more. But perhaps this is another pathological tendency that we have in the way that we try to obtain more, to have more. Maybe the need to travel and to make things go faster is another great imbalance worth exploring and considering healing. Let me know what you think down below.